Hauling herself out of bed, Cherry Magraw saw through her window the first shreds of morning light. Her body ached for sleep. There was no traffic yet. A cat had walked past, and a fox, just after she'd woken the first time. She had watched the fox for a few minutes as it nuzzled at the recycling crates, wiped its nose along the wheelie bins, then disappeared in a flicker. She padded on cold floorboards to the table. Her laptop screen glowed, open where she'd left it. Cherry looked at the clock. Just over an hour ago. She read back what she'd written and cringed. Even those few lines were crass. What was she telling him that he didn't already know? She felt chilled. Her feet and fingers were icy from the 45 minutes she'd spent at the table, no socks or jumper, just in her t-shirt, trying and trying again to compose the email. This was way past the beginning of the end. The end had started 10 months ago when Garth's wife had come home to him and the twins. Cherry had told him they could no longer carry on. He'd agreed. They would each survive, they knew. She had survived, Cherry thought, but the daily effort was too much now that she could no longer sleep either. She'd thrown herself into reporting on the violence that seethes behind closed doors, making herself the go-to journalist for editors who knew that misery and violence always sells. She'd been to Bristol's courts so often, the security guards barely glanced in her bag, waving her through as they did the lawyers and social workers who frequented the courts every day. Her editors were pleased. At least they kept commissioning her, which was the only feedback a freelance journalist could rely on. Cherry had just published a feature about a young woman's sudden death, which police had not recognised as murder and refused to investigate. As the weeks in which she had researched the story went on, and each new police failing came to light, Cherry found her nights broken, and her mind buzzing with frustration at the chances squandered to investigate a death she was sure was a crime. She sighed and closed her laptop. Her article had forced the police to reopen the case. It was what the family had hoped for, and the best reporting could achieve. She should be feeling vindicated, professionally thrilled. Instead, her personal life was a shit show, and she was feeling bleaker than she could remember. Grabbing a blanket off the back of the sofa and wrapping it tightly round herself, she tumbled into the softness of velvet cushions and groaned. She had to find a way to tell Garth that she was going to up sticks and leave the country. She would pick up the itinerant life she'd once led, reporting from the knife-edge tension of post-conflict states in the swirling international community of here today, gone tomorrow aid workers, ex-military personnel raking in fortunes as private security, UN consultants of variable quality, and freelance stringers like herself. The years she had spent travelling across these fragile new nations had introduced her to women and girls who had been raped as part of the wars they had somehow survived, that had fired Cherry's reporting and brought her to the attention of national news editors. It was also what had brought her back to Bristol 2 years ago. Burnt out, and knowing that at least for a time, she needed to call a halt to stories of lives broken and sometimes obliterated by sexual violence. It hadn't worked in the end. Cherry had been inexorably drawn back into these stories, and in the excitement of meeting Garth, she had been able to cope. But now, bereft and alone, it was too hard.